Israel gets the ark back. Now, Samuel now, Eli is dead, Hophni and Phinehas are dead, Samuel takes over. Samuel has got to, what's the first thing he's got to do as a new leader? Samuel's got to win a victory. And so in chapter 7, Samuel takes over. He wins his first victory at a place called Ebenezer. Ebenezer. He sets up a stone, Ebenezer. Can anybody see the word Etzer? Does anybody remember we talked about Etzer before? When did we say that? Does anybody remember back in Genesis, Eve would be Adam's Etzer, helper? This stone of help, who is Israel's stone of help? God. God is Ebenezer. So Samuel sets up this stone and basically honoring God for having delivered in Ebenezer. And Samuel here, it's really cool. Then Samuel said, "Assemble all Israel to Mizpah, and I will intercede to the Lord for you." And so they fasted and they confessed, "We have sinned against the Lord." Is Samuel a good leader? He gets his people to confess before they fight. And then they said to Samuel, verse 8 of chapter 7, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines." So they're going out to battle. Samuel is going to be in prayer while they go out to battle. He's going to intercede for them. Who's that almost like? They go out to battle and he intercedes to God. What does that remind you of? Who would that? Yeah, does anybody remember Moses and kind of a similar structure? Moses interceding for the people and that kind of stuff. Ebenezer. Now this brings up a problem, however. If you go from chapter 7, verse 12 about Ebenezer, where it tells about how Samuel names the place Ebenezer, there's a problem. Because back in chapter 5, 2 chapters earlier, it says, after the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. They took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. And you say, well, wait a minute, Hildebrandt. Let's suppose I'm a Bible critic. And a Bible critic says, wait a minute, you got a contradiction in the Bible here. The Bible says that Samuel named it in chapter 7, verse 12 was when Samuel named that place Ebenezer. But here you are back 2 chapters earlier, which is probably, quite a bit earlier, years earlier, and it's called Ebenezer back here in chapter 5, verse 1. That's not right. It wasn't named Ebenezer in chapter 5. You have to wait till chapter 7, verse 12, till Samuel names it Ebenezer. And so that's a contradiction in the Bible, and basically this is an error in the Bible. Okay? And this is what critics would point out. It's named in chapter 7, verse 12, but yet the name Ebenezer was used 2 chapters earlier. Obviously the historians got it mixed up. The historian got mixed up, and it's a contradiction. It's an error in the Bible. Do you know what an anachronism is? Chronism. Can you see chronism there? Chronism. Does anybody do Greek? Chronos. Time. Okay, chronology. You guys would say chronology, time. Anachronology means it's out of sync. Okay, it's out of time. It's out of time. And this is what you call an anachronism. When is the book of Samuel written? Is Samuel written much later? Samuel's dead in chapter 28, so it's written after the lifetime of Samuel. It's written later. And what you have happening here is the person who's writing the book looking back, and does he call that place Ebenezer because that's what everybody in his day calls it, Ebenezer. So it would be like this. If I said to you, the witches, remember we had the witch burnings in Salem, Massachusetts. Okay, the witch burnings. In 1690 something? 1690s. Okay, and I said to you, and the witches were taken up to Danvers. Now, do you guys all know where Danvers is, Liberty Tree Mall? Okay, and I said Danvers. Everybody would know where that is. Question, did I just make a contradiction? Yeah. When the witches were taken up there, was that called Danvers at that time? No. But if I said Salem Village to you, how many would know Salem Village? Almost nobody. So what I do is I call it by a present name just so you guys know where it is. Is that the way history is written all the time? You don't call it by the original name. If you said Salem Village, nobody know what it is. So what I'm saying is this isn't a contradiction. This is just a guy who's writing later. He calls it, and everybody in his day calls Ebenezer, Ebenezer, and then he narrates how Ebenezer got its name later, but he uses the term earlier. Now, is that a big contradiction? Do we do that all the time? Yeah, so it's no big deal, okay? No big deal. But critics get on this stuff and they say, oh, see, there's a contradiction in the Bible. It wasn't named till chapter 7, but it's used back chapters 4 and 5, as a matter of fact. And you say, chill out. I mean, if that's the only contradiction you got to find, you're in trouble, So, but anyway, so anachronism, some of the things, when a guy's writing later, he's going to use the names and stuff that he's familiar with. He's going to put those back in the narrative. So, okay, now what's the problem? Samuel wins his first victory, but now Samuel himself has a problem. And in chapter 8, verse 3, it says, let me start with 8:1. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges of Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abiah, and they were served at Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, they accepted bribes, and they perverted justice. What was a judge not to do? Was a judge to establish justice? Yes. And the other thing a judge was not to do was to accept what? Bribes. Money and justice were not to be connected. His sons pervert justice rather than establishing it. They pervert justice and they accept bribes. So his sons, he's the last big judge. He tries to make his sons. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. And they said, Samuel, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as the other nations have. Why does Israel call for a king? They call for a king because Samuel's kids are no good. Samuel's kids are perverting justice and taking bribes. The people look at his sons and say, Samuel, you're a great guy, Samuel. Nothing against you. You're a godly person. You're a good person. Your kids are all messed up. We need a king to rule over us. And so they call for a king. So that's how kingship gets introduced into Israel. This Israel's calling because of the failure of Samuel's sons. Now, on fathers and sons, let's do a little review here. Was Eli a fairly godly person himself? Eli seems to be a godly person himself. I want to put a plus or minus there. He should have restrained his sons, but Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, turn out evil, so evil that God takes them out. So Eli, not a terrible person, good person in many ways, but his sons are evil and things. Is Samuel a good, godly person all the days of his life? Samuel is a winner. Samuel is a winner, and yet his sons turn out terribly. Okay, they accept bribes, they pervert justice. So is it possible to be a good father, a good person, and have your kids turn out bad? Okay? I thought that if I were the ideal person, then my kids would turn out wonderfully, that the parents, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The kids would turn out well and things. Is that true? What about this guy, Saul? I'm going to try to show you that Saul is a jerk. Okay, to put it bluntly. Saul has got major problems. This guy is a jerk. Saul has got major problems. He tries to kill David repeatedly. This guy is against God in so many ways and stuff. But tell me about Saul's son, Jonathan. Tell me about Saul's son, Jonathan. Is this guy a gold nut? When I was looking for guys to marry my daughters in this arranged marriage I had in my head, I was looking for guys like Jonathan. And I was hoping that my daughters would meet somebody like Jonathan. Because Jonathan was whose best friend, by the way? David's best friend. Jonathan and David are tight. Likes attract likes and stuff. And Jonathan's just a good person. Is Jonathan better than his father? His father's got all sorts of problems trying to kill people and David and stuff like that. Jonathan's just a gem. Jonathan's a gem. So here you got a bad father. Is it possible to have a bad father and the kid turns out great? Yeah. Now what about David? David, what's the problem? Is David the man after God's own heart? David's the man after God's own heart, but David had a problem with Bathsheba, Uriah, okay, so David's not perfect and things, but David has one son, Solomon. The Solomon turns out to be the what? The Einstein of the ancient, Israel. He's the wisest man that ever lived kind of thing. Solomon, Shlomo. So David has a winner of a son, but what about Absalom? David's other son. David's other son, Absalom, tried to kill who? Or whom? Actually, you guys beat me to it. Yeah, he kills his other brother, and then after that, after he gets done and actually he does kill his brother, Amnon, but then he tries to kill what? Absalom tries to kill David, his own father. Freud was right, okay? Tries to kill his father. I'm sorry, that shouldn't, no, okay. Strike that. Okay, but Absalom tries to kill his father. Okay, so Absalom was really bad. My conclusion to this is, does each generation have to come to know God for themselves? Does each generation have to come to know God for themselves? I can know God in my family. The question, can my children throw God away? Does each generation have to come and kind of become its own person, its own way of doing things? My son and I were just discussing this the other night. He warned me, he said, Dad, when my generation gets in the positions of power, he says, you better fear for your life. Okay? And serious. He was real serious. I thought, chill out. You guys will mature. Your generation will mature just like, I hope. But he's really, very negative and does not, anyways, yeah, Alana.
It just reminded me of something my mother always says. God has kids, he doesn't have grandkids. So
yeah,
your relationship with God is your individual relationship.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that just because this is so good. I need to get it on this tape and stuff. He says, God has kids, he has no grandkids. And so each generation is, how did you say that? You said it better than that. God has what?
Kids. I said the same thing.
Okay, God has kids, doesn't have grandkids. And I really agree with that. And it's just, I don't know. So every generation has to own God for themselves and come to know God for themselves. And it's really important.